Welcome back to the community once again, precious audience. Now, guess what is actually happening in the Sahel, most especially in Burkina Faso? Burkina Faso is actually facing a moment of intense political tension, ladies and gentlemen. The UN has actually issued a powerful warning to the country's military rulers, specifically Captain Ibrahim Traore, urging them to reverse their decision to ban all political communities or parties. This bold move has actually sparked fears about the future of political freedom in this West African state, Burkina Faso. In 2022, ladies and gentlemen, a military junta took control of Burkina Faso, and ever since, it has actually suspended political activities, leaving citizens with a little room to express dissent. Now, the junta plans to go even further, by dissolving all political parties or communities, a decision that threatens to silence any form of political opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, guess what? Volker Tech, this particular man here that you're actually seeing, that is the UN's right chief. He didn't actually hold back in his statement, ladies and gentlemen. He called on the government to stop repressing its people and, of course, open up more space for civil society to flourish. His message was actually clear, ladies and gentlemen. Banning political parties and, of course, imprisoning individuals for speaking their minds will not actually help the country grow. Instead, the authorities must respect the basic human rights of freedom and, of course, association and expression. This is according to him. The situation has actually caught the attention of the global community, ladies and gentlemen. With the UN's intervention or involvement, the pressure is now on the Burkina Faso authorities to rethink their actions, ladies and gentlemen. However, the junta has not actually shown signs of backing down yet. So what will actually happen next in Burkina Faso? That is the question I'm actually asking you. The military juntas or Captain Ibrahim Traore's crackdown on political parties or communities is only one of a larger effort to control civil society in Burkina Faso, ladies and gentlemen. In the past year, several national and international organizations have actually had their activities suspended. These suspensions, ladies and gentlemen, were either unexplained or justified by vague reasons like unauthorized data collection. Now, guess what? Things took a darker turn in July, of last year, 2025, when the junta or Captain Ibrahim Traore specifically passed a new law severely restricting the freedom of association. This law, ladies and gentlemen, makes it much more harder, for organizations to operate freely within the country of Burkina Faso. Then, in November, a decree was actually issued demanding that all non-governmental organizations, that is NGOs, open accounts with a state-run bank. This move gives the government greater control over civil society groups in Burkina Faso, ladies and gentlemen. Guess what? These measures, are stifling essential humanitarian work and, of course, shrinking the space for people to act on their beliefs and, of course, values. The UN Rights Office warns that these actions, ladies and gentlemen, are creating a serious crisis for Burkina Faso's civil society. Although the junta has freed some people who had been wrongly detained, the problem of enforced disappearances and, of course, wrongful arrest continues. These violations, ladies and gentlemen, often target journalists, members of the judiciary, and, of course, leaders of political and civil society groups. This paints a grim picture of how serious the human rights situation has become now in Burkina Faso. Guess what? The UN has actually called for Burkina Faso to live up to its commitment to uphold or support human rights and freedom. Now, the question is, will the government of Burkina Faso listen, or will it continue its crackdown on its own people? Now, ladies and gentlemen, here is why Burkina Faso Captain Ibrahim Traore decided to dissolve all political parties in the country. In a bold move that has actually captured global attention, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Burkina Faso has actually announced the dissolution of all political parties and, of course, organizations, citing the need to rebuild the state. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the Interior Minister, this decision is actually necessary to address the divisions and, of course, the dysfunctions that have actually plagued the country's political system for years. The minister stated that the presence of multiple political parties had only deepened social divides and, of course, weakened national unity. This decision, ladies and gentlemen, was actually made after a Council of Ministers meeting, which actually resulted in the approval of two significant or important actions, ladies and gentlemen. First, the decree to dissolve all political parties, and of course, secondly, the draft law that repeals the laws governing their operation, founding, and of course, the status of the leader of the opposition. These changes are aimed to creating a more unified and of course stable government for the country of Burkina Faso. The Burkinabe authorities, ladies and gentlemen, have actually justified this move as part of their larger goal to rebuild the country after facing years of political instability and of course widespread corruption, whilst the country has faced severe scrutiny challenges due to terrorist attacks. Some argue that the dissolution of political parties could actually also be seen as a strategic way to consolidate power and of course control under the current military junta. Ladies and gentlemen, this move to dissolve political groups, ladies and gentlemen, is expected to have profound implications on the country's democracy. With the repeal of laws governing political parties, there is growing concern that the space for political expression and of course civil participation may be further restricted. Ladies and gentlemen, critics or enemies of the junta, Captain Ibrahim Traore, argue that this decision could actually lead to a weakening of political freedoms, stifling open debate and of course dissent. However, supporters of the move argue that it is a necessary or important step in the effort to stabilize the country and of course heal divisions that have actually hindered or stopped with no progress. Now, ladies and gentlemen, whilst the political situation in Burkina Faso grows more tense, the country's economy is actually showing surprising signs of resilience. On February 4th, President Captain Ibrahim Traore met with the International Monetary Fund, for short, IMF, which commended, or praised the country's progress in stabilizing its finances and, of course, strengthening its economy. The IMF praised Captain Ibrahim Traore's clear economic vision, highlighting that government finances are actually stabilizing. Key reforms are underway, and, of course, the country's microeconomic situation is actually steadily improving, despite the ongoing security challenges, ladies and gentlemen. Burkina Faso's economy is actually growing, driven in part by the country's regained sovereignty. This progress, ladies and gentlemen, in economic stability is a significant or important achievement for Burkina Faso. The IMF's recognition of the country's efforts shows that even in times of crisis, ladies and gentlemen, there is a potential for growth. However, questions remain. Can Burkina Faso maintain this economic progress whilst dealing with its political and human rights challenges? That is the question. Let us know your thoughts at the comment section. At this critical moment, ladies and gentlemen, the country stands at a crossroads or junctions. Economic progress is actually promising, but political repression is actually a growing concern. If you actually find these updates or this valuable analysis very helpful, please make sure once again to take just a moment to subscribe and like this very quick video, and don't forget to actually most importantly turn on notifications to stay informed and updated every single day. Burkina Faso finds itself at a moment of great uncertainty. On one hand, the country's economic recovery is actually gaining momentum. The support from international partners like the IMF is a statement to the resilience of Burkina Faso's economy. On the other hand, ladies and gentlemen, the political situation is deteriorating, and of course government restrictions on civil society and of course political freedoms are raising alarms. The UN's emergency warning is a call to action. The junta must actually reverse its plans to dissolve political parties and of course respect the basic freedoms of its people. The world is actually watching closely as Burkina Faso's leadership faces pressure from both within and of course outside the country or the state. Burkina Faso's future hangs into the balance, ladies and gentlemen. Can the country reconcile its growing economy with its need for political freedom and of course human rights? That is the question again for you. Let us know about that at the comment section.